PSA, keep your eye on these little trucks. They multiply out of nowhere. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the finale of the SCX24 budget build-off. This was an 8-week series where Matt from the Scale Builders Guild and myself took an Axial SCX24 and upgraded it with $50 every week. And this is the very final week, week 8. Up to this point, we have done a ton of modifications to this, our subject of the budget build-off. Now, when it started, it was a bone stock Axial SCX24 Betty, just like this one here. And it's transformed into something much, much different over these last 8 weeks. This week, however, we've got a lot to talk about because it's the finale week. We had to make a lot of decisions on what exactly to do for this week. In the past 7 weeks, we've done wheels and tires, overdrive. We have done brass and aluminum axle upgrades. We've adjusted the wheelbase. We've done some free upgrades as well. Then we also did a new chassis, all new electronics. We moved the motor configuration around completely, but that doesn't necessarily knock out everything. There's still plenty of items left that we could upgrade on this little truck. While doing all of those upgrades, I've really been focusing on the performance of this truck mostly. Style, I wanted things to just take that into mind, but it wasn't something that I was focusing on trying to improve. I was really just focused on the performance of this truck, where in Matt's videos, he's done a bigger mix of doing some things for pure style and appearance, and then some items for performance. So we took very drastically different routes. Our trucks are completely different, but that has made this one of the best budget build series that we've done to date. As I mentioned, for this final week, we have so many items that we could look at: shocks, links, drive shafts, and there's a lot of other items that we could upgrade to metal as well. Axle housings, transmission housings, we could do skid plates, just a ton of different things yet to be completed on this truck. That's not to say that you have to have all of those things done to have a very capable or very fun SCX24, but those are all still options available to us to upgrade for this week. So keeping those things in mind, I started doing some shopping. I wanted to go out with a bang on the final week, so I did a lot of hunting around to try and find just the best combination of things that we could possibly do. And I came up with a number of options. So let's go through them. For our first option, these trucks are a typical straight axle with a worm gear drive. So it's got a gear above the actual diff rather than a drive shaft that just comes in the back. But what these don't have are portals, and portals are super popular right now. And I ran across a new option that's coming out for portals for these trucks, and I was able to get a hold of a set, kind of. The set I was actually able to get my hands on was a pre-production set, not yet ready, but they're going to be ready soon. Since they aren't totally ready yet, I didn't feel like I could put them on the budget build truck, but put them on this deadbolt here instead. Now these are a sintered nylon printed pre-production set, which I think that these are going to be available like this. They've got a brass gear inside of the portals. This raises the axle up, gives you more clearance under the axle. Now that raises the whole truck up, but again, it's kind of a handoff between more axle clearance so you can go over obstacles versus keeping your center of gravity lower. This raises the center of the axle up 6 millimeters, so it's a pretty big difference. It'd be like finding a 1/2 inch taller tire. A cool option, but like I said, they aren't available yet for sale. I'm gonna put a link in the description below too, where you're gonna be able to find the pre-order for these. I was really hoping that these were going to be in production by the end of this series because it was something I really wanted to use, but didn't quite make it. They are also going to be doing a metal version of the portal. That's going to come, I believe, after the first of the year. But all of the information and the pre-order, I'll put a link to in the description below. You can go check them out if you too would really like to have a set of portals for your SCX24. But unfortunately, they don't get to officially make it into the budget build-off. So on to our next option. So then I started looking into some of the other areas of the build that I wanted to conquer. And one thing that I've really wanted to improve on this truck has been the shocks. The shocks on this truck up to this point have been the factory shocks, which are just a coil carrier basically. They don't have any adjustment beyond that. You can fill them with grease and try and add some fluid in there so that it has a little bit of dampening. Now, there's a ton of shock options for the SCX24, and I grabbed a number of them so that I could try and make a decision on exactly which ones I wanted versus the stock ones. Picked up a couple of different sets from Power Hobbies. These are the exact same shocks in different colors. Then I picked up a set from Hot Racing, which are labeled emulsion shocks. I'm gonna open these up and see because the design of them looks exactly the same as these Power Hobbies. And lastly, I picked up a set of the Hot Racing internal spring. They call these air shocks. Lastly, no matter which set that we go with, there's enough money in the budget to swap to this Hot Racing aluminum transmission case. The reason that I wanna do that is that the case that I've already got in the truck here has kind of started to split where the top screw goes down. That foot is pretty small. I've had this transmission in and out of this truck a number of times during the chassis swap and the motor swap and all that, and that plastic case has got a little tired. Since our first option with the portals didn't work out this week, this is kind of option 2. But I also came up with an option 3. What we've got here are another brass gear cover from Power Hobby. This I could put on the rear of the truck. Up to this point, most of the weight that I've added, like the brass knuckles and the gear cover, have been focused in the front. Now I do try and keep a forward weight bias, but as we've discussed, keeping the center of gravity low in this vehicle has been my goal. Adding a little bit of weight in the rear, as long as it's down low like that, is fine. For the most part, I don't usually add much to the rear, but these little trucks can use a little bit. I don't try and go nuts back there, but this could probably help. Next, I have some micro single stage tire foams from Crawler Innovations. I actually have a medium compound and a soft compound. These would replace the foams that come inside of these Little Guy Racing Parts tires. These foams are exceptionally soft, and I think that doing a little bit of upgrading there would be a good idea. For the soft and medium, I would actually put the soft in the front and the medium in the rear. Reason for that is that when you're on something steep, the weight of the vehicle all basically rests on the rear tires. Using a little bit of a stiffer foam in the rear will help keep the vehicle supported and give you the longest functional wheelbase you can. If your tires are collapsing, you're basically shortening your effective wheelbase. So replacing the foams that came in these tires with these, definitely a good option. But wait, there's more. Also, I've got a Yeah Racing aluminum front steering link. We put a servo in here that is much stronger than the factory one. So that front steering link has a lot of movement. Replacing that linkage would be a nice benefit. Get rid of a little bit of the floppiness of that stock one. Since the drag link, which is the link that goes from the servo horn to the connection point on the axle, since it mounts to the tie rod, which is this other link that ties the two knuckles together, since it mounts onto that tie rod, it makes it a little bit floppy and lets it move around quite a bit. Going with an option like this, it comes with some O-rings. We're gonna be able to tighten up and get rid of a little bit of that slop, make your steering a little bit more responsive. And then we could still throw on this inexpensive rear truss mount, which is just that simple little cap on the rear axle that your upper four-link links go to. So that would be our third option for the finale. It's a pretty good one as well. As you can imagine, at this point, I'm having a very hard time deciding exactly which one to install. The portals are awesome, but they're not quite ready. So I can't do that one. Option 2 had some really good parts in there. So I want to go through those shocks specifically and see which ones I like the best, and then try and make a decision. So after taking a look at the very similar Hot Racing and the Power Hobby shocks, they're almost identical. Everything about the lower part of the shock is the exact same. The only difference I could find at all was that the emulsion hot racing shock has a rubber seal on the top side of the cap. The only difference. I don't have a whole lot of confidence that they will hold any sort of oil. I put a couple of drops of a fairly heavyweight oil in there to try and get them moving a little bit. If you put nearly any oil in them, they feel like they want to lock up. So overall, I don't know that any extra cost is worth it for those shocks compared to the other options that are out there. Now, I did have those other hot racing shocks. However, like the stock shocks, these actually have a lot of side-to-side shaft play, which I just never like to see in shocks. But overall, these are a smooth shock, and the bore of the actual shock shaft is pretty heavy. So that would be another shock that I would probably consider. Now, a lot of people like to go with the extended shocks, but going for a ton of flex, like I've said before, not something that I feel is worth it. I know people love to see a lot of flex for their crawlers, but over years and years of competing, we've seen that just having a lot of flex doesn't mean that you have a capable crawler, it just means that it looks cool for pictures on your bench. So take that into consideration when choosing them. Out of the batch that I had, each one kind of had a pro and con, whether it be price or style. All of them had about the same amount of throw, and we've adjusted our shock angle so that we have kind of a balance of a nice smooth controlled suspension, but still having a little bit more travel than stock. I also installed that hot racing aluminum transmission case. I actually like that upgrade, not just for the fact that it's an aluminum part in there. One problem with the stock case is that if you tighten those screws even just a little bit more than loosely snug, then it'll start to bind up the gears. This aluminum case, I did not see that same issue happening. Beyond just having some aluminum threads to go into from the skid plate or through the top down into the skid plate, it actually has a purpose to it. I like that upgrade. If we were to stick with this option 2, shocks and transmission case, overall I think I'd be pretty happy. But we should take a look at option 3 again. Now, if you remember in option 3, we had the Crawler Innovations single stage foams, a set of soft and a set of medium. These, they are super wide. They're probably twice as wide as these tires. I'm most interested to see how fitting those in the tire and then getting them mounted back on these kind of pain in the butt RC 4-wheel drive Steelies is gonna go. That's going to be an interesting one to install. Beyond that, we also had the other brass diff cover, which we would put on the rear axle. Then we had the Yeah Racing aluminum steering links. This would really help tighten up that front steering. And lastly, we've got that aluminum rear truss for the upper forelink. I specifically want to take a closer look at these foams. So let's take apart a set of these wheels and see how it is to stuff those things in there. Installing those tire foams, not as bad as I would have thought. Comparing them to the stock foams that came in these tires is insane. At least 4 times as wide as that stock foam. But it made a nice difference. There's a good difference in density between the soft and the mediums that Crawler Innovations sells. So I put the soft in the front again and the medium in the rear. And it's definitely got a lot more sidewall support when you've got all of the weight of the truck on the sidewall. It doesn't want to roll over as much. They just are a good fit. I think that these tires, they work great. And I think that even the smaller tires, they'll still work well on. So overall, really happy with the choice of those. I put them on the passenger side first and left the stock ones in on the driver's side so I could do an actual comparison between them here on the bench before I made a final decision. Pretty happy though, and I think it's a big update from the ones that come in these little guy racing tires. Now, the steering link option, also one that I am super happy with. There is no more rocking back and forth of those stock links. These with the O-rings work really, really well. And I think that this is definitely something that's going to help the feel of driving this truck, just tighten everything up. We've got a nice big servo in there with that more rigid steering link and those big tires. This thing's just gonna do exactly what I feel like it should now when I've got it out on the terrain. The brass gear cover, exact same installation as the front, bolted up really easily, no surprises there. I did install that upper truss, that aluminum piece, I think it was Hot Racing. I don't know that there's much of a reason to do that. I did it because it helped round out my budget. It was just an inexpensive piece that I had to kind of fill that little bit of a remainder I had left for the budget if I went with option number 3. You guys have to put in the comments below which one of the options you think was the best choice of parts, and then that's the one that I'll leave on here. I'll definitely take the other ones off to make this all official. But let's go over the budget calculations so that you guys can make your decision a little bit more wisely of which parts I should leave on this truck. Last week we had a remainder of $3.18. Adding that to our $50 budget for the week gives us $53.18. That's what we've got to play with. Now, if we went with option 1, which would have been the portal kit, this is $49.99. It's a pretty good option, leaving us at $3.19 remaining. So using a good amount of the budget, something to keep in mind. Or if we go with option 2, which was the emulsion shocks and the transmission case, the emulsion shocks are $29.99 and that transmission case, $19.99. So again, right under 50 bucks. That would leave us with $3.20 left over. Option 3, the steering links, the Crawler Innovations foams, the brass rear gear cover, and that aluminum upper truss. The steering links, $9.89. The Crawler Innovation foams are $3.95 a pair. Of course, you need 2 of them, so $7.90. The Power Hobbies brass rear gear cover, $15.99. And the Hot Racing rear axle truss, $6.89. That would give us a total of $40.67, leaving $12.51 remaining still. Definitely our least efficient use of the budget. So you let me know, which one do you think is the best choice out of those? All joking aside, this has been one of the most fun budget builds that we've done to date. I had an absolute blast. Matt and I both like to have a lot of fun. There was some real information in here. Yeah, we had some fun with the budget a few weeks here and there, but in the end, I think there was some actual good info that could come out of this series if you have an SCX24 and you're really looking to do some upgrades. Keeping the effect of each upgrade in mind is super important to the final outcome of your truck and can really make a difference with smart spending as you accomplish a project. So hopefully there were some things that made some sense to you in there and it will help you in the future. I'm excited to see what Matt's final episode will look like. To remember where these trucks started and where they ended up, mine definitely still resembles some version of its initial life. Matt's not so much. He definitely went a wildly different direction, and I had an awesome time watching it right along with you guys. Make sure and go check out his finale for the budget build off as well. I will put a link to it in the description below. Matt and I will both have a follow-up video with some running footage of our budget build trucks out on the rocks. I'm gonna take mine to Proline by the Fire this coming weekend and shoot some video of it out there. So stay tuned for that. I'm excited to go crawl with this thing outside versus in-house bench crawling only up to this point. Wanted to keep it fairly fresh for all the videos, but looking forward to crawling some actual terrain with it. Matt and I have been talking with how much we enjoyed this budget build and definitely want to do another one probably just after the first of the year. So if you have suggestions on what you would like to see for the next budget build off, make sure put it in the comments below. Appreciate all of you who followed along with this series. Again, had an absolute blast. If you enjoyed it, hit the like button. Subscribe if you're not already and hit the notification bell so you see the videos as soon as they get uploaded. As always, thanks again for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.